What happens when you harass someone who spent decades training elite warriors? A combat veteran faced brutal humiliation on a crowded train, unaware his military background would soon change everything. The confrontation that followed? Unforgettable. The subway screeched to a halt, doors hissing open to welcome Monday morning commuters. The car filled quickly, businessmen clutching coffee, students with headphones, workers staring at phones. Nobody made eye contact in the artificial light. Near the door stood Patricia Mitchell, silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing a beige cardigan and clutching a worn canvas tote. At 68, she carried herself with quiet dignity, taking minimal space despite the crowd. Across from her sprawled a young man in his 20s, backwards cap, baggy jeans, legs deliberately spread across two seats. His music leaked through expensive headphones as he scrolled through his phone. The empty seat beside him beckoned. Patricia leaned forward, her voice barely audible above the train's rumble. "Excuse me, would you mind if I sat down?" The young man didn't look up. "Train's full, lady. Gotta claim your spot early." He stretched his legs wider. A middle-aged businessman nearby adjusted his glasses, noticed the interaction, then looked away. No one spoke up. In the far corner sat James Mitchell, Patricia's husband. Weathered hands rested on his knees, military-issue boots planted firmly on the floor. His gray eyes surveyed the car from beneath a faded cap, missing nothing. Not yet interfering, but watching everything. The subway jolted around a bend, lights flickering as the car swayed. Patricia steadied herself against the pole, her shoulder accidentally brushing the young man's arm. He jerked away dramatically. "Don't touch me, hag," he snapped. Heads turned briefly, then quickly away. Patricia's face flushed, but she said nothing, backing away slightly. Her grip tightened on her grocery bag. The man smirked. "Seriously, y'all see this? Can't even ride in peace without old folks invading your space." No response from other passengers. A teenage girl stood across the aisle, fingers hovering over her phone camera, but never pressing record. "What's in the bag, Grandma?" "Something worth fighting over." He flicked the strap with two fingers. Patricia shook her head. "Please don't." He grabbed the bottom of her tote anyway, tilting it sharply. Two apples fell, rolling under seats. The jar of homemade preserves shifted but didn't break. Patricia gasped softly and bent to retrieve her groceries, steadying herself against the pole. That's when he deliberately jerked his elbow back, catching her just below the collarbone. Patricia stumbled backward, hitting the metal door frame with a dull thud. The impact wasn't loud, but the silence afterward was deafening. An elderly man half rose from his seat, then sat back down. A woman covered her mouth with her scarf. "Lesson for today," the young man announced proudly. "Don't lean on strangers." In the corner, James Mitchell finally lifted his head, his weathered hands, calloused from decades of weapons training in combat, slowly curled into loose fists. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. The change was subtle but absolute, like a safety being quietly switched off. James stood, his movement economical and precise. He didn't rush or push through the crowd. He simply began walking, measured, deliberate steps past other passengers. The young troublemaker didn't notice him approaching. "You see this? This is what happens when people forget they're not special. Everyone thinks they deserve respect just because they're old." No one responded. A businessman stared at his shoes. The teenage girl lowered her phone. Patricia straightened herself with effort, one hand still clutching the pole. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of public humiliation. Then came James's voice, quiet, controlled, with the unmistakable edge of command that had once directed elite soldiers through hostile territories. "Pick it up." The young man blinked, confused, then turned. James Mitchell stood just 2 feet away. His faded flight jacket hung open, revealing a simple gray t-shirt. A small, worn military patch was barely visible on the jacket's shoulder, the kind only fellow servicemen would recognize. "What?" the troublemaker snapped. James didn't blink. "The apples." Picked them up and apologized. A ripple of tension spread through the car. Someone hit record on their phone. The young man laughed nervously, then louder. "Who are you supposed to be?" "Her bodyguard." James said nothing. He simply took one more step forward, his stance adjusting automatically, weight centered, balance perfect. Not aggressive, but undeniably prepared. This wasn't aggression. This was readiness. The kind forged through decades of combat training. The troublemaker stood up, trying to assert dominance. "What's your problem, old man?" James's voice remained level. "She was hurt. You did it. Now fix it." There was no threat in his tone, just a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of someone who had given thousands of non-negotiable orders. The young man glanced around, but this time, no one looked away. He rolled his shoulders, trying to appear larger. "Back off. I'm warning you." James tilted his head slightly. "I've already warned you." The tension plateaued, heavy and alive. Then, from 2 rows down, another voice called out, "Yo, you need help, man." A heavier-built young man rose, earbuds dangling, neck tattoo partially visible beneath his collar. The first troublemaker smiled wider. "See? Now what?" James didn't turn fully. His eyes flicked briefly to assess the new threat, then back to the first man. The calculation happened in milliseconds, distance, positioning, potential weapons, exit routes. Assessment patterns ingrained through years of combat situations. The train swayed slightly. James's posture remained unchanged, boots planted firmly, hands relaxed at his sides. Across the car, phones were now recording openly. "You want trouble, Gramps?" The first man taunted. "Because I don't back down for nobody." James didn't answer. His stillness was unnatural to civilians, the controlled economy of movement that marked special operators. No wasted energy, no telegraphed intentions. A third young man emerged from further down the car, creating a triangle around James. "You want to get dropped, old-timer? We don't care who you think you are." The first troublemaker waved his hand in James's face. "What, you deaf? You lost? First time in the city?" James finally spoke, his voice lower now. "This is your last chance." The words weren't shouted or dramatic, just stated as fact, like reporting weather conditions or confirming coordinates. The first man snorted. "My last chance to what? Pick up fruit for Granny?" He reached forward, palm open, and shoved James's chest. James absorbed the push with minimal movement. Not because he had to, but because he chose to conserve energy. The pressure rolled through him like wind past a stone. The man pushed again, harder. "You don't want this, old man. Trust me." James looked over at his wife. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice softer. Patricia nodded slightly. "A little." Something changed in James's eyes then, not anger, but focus. The kind of focus that had once allowed him to remain functional while bullets flew and men died around him. He took one measured step forward. The troublemaker immediately shoved him again, but this time James caught the wrist midair. Not roughly, not twisting it, just stopping it completely, like the man's arm had hit steel. The troublemaker blinked in surprise and tried to pull back, but couldn't move. James's grip hadn't tightened. It didn't need to. His hand position had simply locked the joint in place using principles of body mechanics he'd taught to hundreds of elite soldiers. "I warned you," James said quietly. The second young man shifted uneasily. He glanced toward the third, who hadn't moved yet. The energy in the train car had completely changed. This wasn't going to be a viral video of an old man getting beaten. This was something else entirely. The first troublemaker yanked his arm free and stepped back. "This guy's crazy. Let's just walk away." But James didn't move. He didn't posture or threaten. He just waited, assessment continuing. The tactical part is brain. The part that kept him alive through 3 combat tours and countless high-risk operations, was tracking all 3 threats simultaneously, calculating distances and angles. The first troublemaker tried to shake off his unease with a laugh. "What now? You're gonna pull out some secret military moves, old man?" James simply adjusted his stance. Barely, but enough that those with trained eyes would recognize the transition to a combat-ready position. The tension broke unexpectedly. From the junction between train cars, where the lighting flickered, a fourth man appeared. No one had noticed him until now. Hoodie up, hands deep in his pockets. He moved deliberately toward James. As James turned slightly to address his wife, the man pulled out a telescopic baton, solid, reinforced steel, and swung it in a practiced arc. The baton cracked against James's temple with a dull sound. Blood immediately streamed down the side of his face. His knees buckled, shoulders slamming into a pole as he hit the floor hard. Patricia screamed. Several passengers shouted. The car erupted into chaos. The attacker stood over James, breathing heavily. His face wasn't cocky. It was blank focused, like this was a job. James lay still, blood pooling beneath his head. "I told you he was just a poser," the first troublemaker said, voice shaky. Patricia dropped to her knees beside her husband. James, look at me." "Nothing." Her voice cracked. "Please." Then a breath. James's eyes opened. Not wide, just enough to indicate consciousness. His fingers flexed against the floor, military training engaging automatically. Assess damage, locate threats, protect vital areas. The baton wielder raised his weapon again. "Don't," Patricia said sharply, rising to her feet. The man sneered. "Stay out of it, lady." That's when James's leg shifted, a subtle movement that combat veterans would recognize as preparation. His elbow planted, hand found the pole. He began pushing himself up with deliberate economy of movement, like a man who had been knocked down in battle before and always gotten back up. Blood streaked down his temple, soaking his collar. His jaw clenched, body momentarily unsteady before straightening. The look he gave the baton wielder wasn't angry. It was tactical, focused. The baton suddenly seemed heavier in the attacker's hand. James moved, not fast, not flashy, just efficient. He stepped inside the baton's effective range. The attacker swung anyway. James leaned inside the strike, his left hand rising to catch the man's wrist mid-swing, stopping the force completely. In one fluid motion, James locked the elbow joint and twisted. The baton clattered to the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the car. The man tried to pull free, but James' palm struck his sternum, a precision blow that sent him staggering back into a pole. His head snapped back, dropping him to one knee. The first troublemaker panicked, turning to flee, but the doors remained closed. He threw a desperate punch that never landed. James sidestepped, caught the arm, and applied a joint manipulation technique taught only to special forces. A crack echoed through the car as the elbow hyperextended. The second attacker charged like a linebacker. James waited, then sidestepped at the last moment. The man's momentum carried him into a bench seat, the impact forcing air from his lungs in a pathetic wheeze. The baton wielder made one final attempt, staggering forward with wild swings. James ducked the first, rolled under the second, then delivered a precision strike to the solar plexus. The man dropped like wet cement. This time he stayed down. James stood motionless, one hand against the wall for balance. Blood still trailed from his temple, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. The entire encounter had lasted less than 30 seconds. The subway car was utterly silent. For men lay groaning on the floor, not unconscious, but thoroughly defeated. No one had seen combat efficiency like this outside of movies. "He just took out 4 guys," whispered a young man in a hoodie. "Didn't even throw a punch until he had to," murmured a woman near the doors. James walked back to his wife, movement still controlled despite his injury. He picked up her crushed tote bag. Only one apple remained intact. He handed it to her gently. Patricia's hand trembled as she took it. James nodded once, a gesture that conveyed volumes between them. For a few seconds, the train was completely still. No one clapped, no one cheered, but everyone felt it. Something extraordinary had happened. A teenage boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered. Was he special forces or something? His mother studied James, noting his stance, the economy of his movements, the calm focus despite blood streaming down his face. She nodded slightly. An older man with a military haircut across the aisle watched with knowing eyes. He recognized what others couldn't: the hallmarks of elite training, combat experience, and a distinct bearing of someone who had once trained others to survive impossible situations. The first troublemaker, still clutching his hyperextended elbow, looked up in disbelief. He had stopped talking, stopped posturing. He finally understood whose presence he had been in. Not a celebrity, not a random tough guy, but something far more lethal. A man who had spent decades perfecting the art of controlled violence for the most elite fighting force in the world. The train slowed, approaching the next station. Overhead, a robotic voice announced a stop. James stood near the center of the car, blood drying on his temple, Patricia holding his arm gently. As the doors opened, they stepped forward together. No one blocked their path. People moved aside respectfully, not from fear, but from something deeper, recognition of quiet strength and dignity. They stepped onto the platform and walked away without looking back, James's hand lightly on Patricia's back. The train remained motionless, as if waiting for them to disappear first. Inside, passengers remained frozen, phones lowered, trying to process what they'd witnessed. By the time James and Patricia reached street level, city sounds enveloped them once more. No one outside knew what had happened. No one recognized them. Life continued, unaware that moments below, a line had been drawn and crossed. "Still want groceries?" James asked quietly. Patricia smiled faintly. "Only if you're feeling up to it." He nodded once. They turned a corner and disappeared into the rhythm of the city. Just another couple on another day. But for those in the subway car, it would never be just a morning commute again. It would be the day they witnessed what real strength looks like. Not in boasting or intimidation, but in protection, discipline, and the quiet dignity of a warrior who never stopped serving.